I'm Julie Marion with the First Time Homebuyer Workshop, and today we're so fortunate to have George Siegal with us, who has just released his Built to Last Buyer Beware movie video, or it's your movie.
It's a documentary film. Yeah, we
Yeah,
made that showing people that your house is probably not built to last, and that a lot of houses are not. And people take chances, they make choices, and if you make the wrong choice, it can be very costly.
right, right. So, how did you get interested in this whole topic?
Well, it's a number of things. First, my background was TV news. I was a TV weatherman for a number of years, so I used to always forecast bad storms. And then I covered them as a reporter, covering people's tragedy, and there was so much of it. I've
Mhm.
lived in places where I've experienced a lot of disasters. And so when I got into living in Florida full time, I live in Tampa, Florida, I said, let's make a film called the first one I made in this genre was called The Last House Standing, and it was about a house in Mexico Beach that survived Hurricane Michael, the only house on the beach. Everything else was wiped out.
Mhm.
And the second iteration of it is Built to Last Buyer Beware. And what that really just focuses on is how much do you really know about the house that you're buying. The
Mhm.
premise is you take all your chips, you walk into a casino, and you put it on one spin of the roulette wheel.
Yeah.
Would you do that if that was your future, your hope? And we do that all the time with houses. People throw all their money in, and they
Mhm.
probably ask more questions about the steak that they're buying for dinner, or the TV that they're buying. They'll do all this research, but they don't ask a lot of questions about the house that they're buying. And those are the most important questions they should be asking.
Well, yeah, it's one of the most important investments you're ever going to make.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is. It's your biggest investment.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you're talking about this house was on Mexico Beach, and my background's in urban planning, so I often think about where are the urban planners. But when I was a planning director, you had all of these uh, people that own this land, and you go up against the urban planning design of an area, and then you have the environmental issues, and then you have the legal rights to actually do something with your land if you own it. So it's just sort of a confluence of all of these different issues. And now with affordable housing and housing just being so expensive, it's tough.
It is tough. And, we live in a country that allows us a lot of freedoms to make
Yeah.
our own decisions. Nobody really wants to be told what to do. In
Right.
my film, The Last House Standing, I had on a gentleman named Henk Ovink, who is a water ambassador, and he was big with helping in the Obama administration when Hurricane Sandy hit. This guy's a genius.
Mm-hmm.
And he was telling me how where he lives, they are told you can't live here. It's going to flood. You have to move somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
If we did that in this country,
Mm-hmm.
there would be lawsuits for the next century, and people would go, no, I want to live by the beach. You can't tell me where to live. I want to live by this river. You can't tell me.
Right.
So you have the freedom of making a bad choice, but then the question is who should pay for that bad choice?
Right, right. I mean, really, the only real way to take it is through eminent domain, and that's very expensive to do.
Yeah, and you can really wipe people out with that. I'm not a big eminent domain fan when they want to put a road through or something. I mean, I understand the intent of it. If a
Right,
railroad has to go someplace, it's a bad day for you. You just
right,
they're not going to reroute it around your house,
right.
but it's still if you're living in a place that's dangerous. And one of the places I notice every time I go back to Los Angeles, I lived in Marina Del Rey for a number of years as a grown up. And there was this area called the LA River where there was considered a floodplain and you could never build there. Well, what did they do? They overbuilt it. There's
Hmm.
all these condos and buildings and
Hmm.
offices and everything right in a floodplain zone. And
Right,
I used to laugh going, they'll never build there. We can't be that stupid.
right,
And we
right.
were.
Well,
Yeah.
that's the same thing in San Diego. There is Mission Valley. It's in a flood zone, and every time it rains a lot, sure enough, all the businesses they built a huge regional shopping center in the middle of this floodplain.
Yeah, and
So it
in
happens
Los
a lot.
Angeles, it doesn't rain very much, but when it rains, it can really flood. And that
Yeah,
area, I don't know if it's flooded because I don't keep a lot of track on it because I haven't lived there for so many years, but
right.
it just doesn't seem like a good idea.
Right. Well, and there's other issues too besides hurricanes and rain. There's earthquakes, there's, tornadoes, there's all kinds of environmental issues. And I was curious you about some of these questions that you are suggesting that buyers ask. And one of the very first ones you have here is you're suggesting that buyers ask, can you tell me of all the natural disasters and dangers that you took into consideration when building the home? Now,
Yeah.
that is a tough question for somebody to answer, either a seller or a builder.
Well, it is. And as a background in TV news, I love the tough questions because I just want to sometimes I just want to see their face when I ask. Now, I would feel a lot more upset if a builder did not have the answer to that question than if the homeowner didn't have an answer to that question. Because
Right,
I think most homeowners are going to be like us. They're not going to know a lot of stuff about that.
right.
Sometimes it's fun to ask just to see if they even know, if they have any
Hmm.
information. But a builder absolutely should know because what they're doing is they're going by a building code. And
That's
a lot of
right.
builders will say, hey, this house is built to code. And I think people really need to understand what that means. What that means is I found the minimum standard I could build this house to without getting in trouble. And that's what I put together for you. It's the
Hmm.
minimum. And building codes are based off of what's happened in the past, not what's going to happen in the future. So any
Hmm.
builder that just looks at you with a smile on their face and says, this is built to code, it's great, I would be concerned about that. And I would want to know more information as to, well, what about this? What about that? We get hurricanes here. We get earthquakes here. We just had an earthquake in Cuba the other day, and we shook here in Tampa. People felt the earthquake. We're not built for earthquakes here at all, by the way. But in California, there's things you want to build for. Did they take fire into consideration? As we've seen the last few years, no. The answer is no. They never do. So I want to ask those questions. And yeah, it's not going to be a question where they're going to like you very much if they have to struggle for the answer. But the builder's not your friend. And I've never bought a house in my life where I've liked the builder afterwards because it's a very personal thing. That's your happily ever after forever home for
Hmm.
them. In some cases, I don't want to say all cases because there's a lot of really good builders out there. I haven't worked with them. I think that they should be building for happily ever after for everybody. They should be putting their best efforts forward. But when you look at videos on YouTube, Google new construction, Google some of the big builders out there and see the problems that they've had. It
Hmm.
is such a flawed science where there can be so many things that go wrong, and people need to be aware of that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think too, if you're a first-time home buyer, you're so overwhelmed by the process, and you're in the middle of this process that can take, six to weeks to a month, and you're working and you have your life, and then all of a sudden you need to have a PhD in five areas,
Yeah,
and
and
really,
what happens a lot, and you probably see this, is I have to relocate someplace, so I have 2 days to
right,
get in there and find a house. So I might be there on a Wednesday and a Thursday.
right,
That really works against you because what I encourage everybody to do when you're buying a property is to walk around the neighborhood and talk to the people in that neighborhood.
right.
And so a builder typically will give you a list of references, the people that still like them.
Hmm.
And they're not going to give you the list of the people that sued them or the people that have non-disclosure agreements and they can't
Hmm.
talk about it because the builder was forced to come back and fix what he did.
Hmm.
So you can find them by walking around the neighborhood and looking for houses that look like yours. And you go,
Hmm.
hi, I'm so and so. We're looking at this house down the street. Just curious who built your house. What's your experience been like? When you had problems, did they come out and take care of it? Are they responsive? You can
Right.
learn a lot of things. You can learn a lot of. We were looking at a house in Tampa, and we walked up to the front door, and a neighbor came up and said, "I wouldn't look at that house." He goes, "Every time it rains, the water comes right up to the front door." Well, we were like the coyote in the Roadrunner.
Yeah.
We were the Roadrunner. The way we sprinted out of there so quickly, it's like, let's get out of here. We're not going to touch this. You can get a lot of information by asking questions around the neighborhood.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And you're right. People, they don't do that.
No, it's uncomfortable. First of all, you're walking up talking to strangers. A lot of people don't
Yeah.
like to do that. I normally don't bother strangers, but I
Yeah.
wish I had. I like the house we live in now. We bought this house on a tree-lined street, beautiful tree-lined street. That's one of the reasons we bought it. When
Hmm.
we got here to move in, every tree was gone on the
Hmm.
street
Hmm.
because they were putting in a sewer project down the middle of the street. Now, we
Right.
probably could have found that out in about 5 minutes by talking to people, but
Yeah.
we didn't do it. Our realtor didn't tell us.
Yeah.
She had to
Well,
know.
well, she may not have. That's the thing. A lot of real estate agents, it's interesting is I think a lot of people rely on the real estate agents. And I was a broker but I was an urban planner before. And so honestly, like I knew a lot more than a lot of real estate agents because you have to look at what they know. You have to know what their background was, right? And so, but the mistake that first time home buyers make is they don't go to town hall or the city or the county and they walk around and ask. That's what the home inspection period is for as well. I mean, when I was a broker, because I'm doing my first time home buyer workshop now, I encouraged people to take a day off work and go to town hall. And I often would meet them there and help them through the process. Um, but not very many agents do that.
No, and I don't want to put all the blame. I don't blame the realtors in the process of what goes wrong in my film at all. I know it's a
Yeah.
very tough job. It's a very competitive field,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of really good realtors out there. It's not your job to tell the home buyer everything because you could get sued if you leave something. I mean, there's so much
Right.
involved in that. I
Right.
just think that there's certain things you
Mhm.
could coach them on. Like I would never turn in an offer without having it ask the seller if the house has ever flooded before. Because
Right.
some places don't have disclosure for that. I think there's 18 states in the country that you don't have to disclose flooding. Why not ask them? Put it in writing. That should be a no-brainer.
Right.
If the realtor can certainly know. I think it's up to the buyer. I put everything ultimately. What I believe the ultimate last man to make the decision, last woman, is us.
Right.
We're the ones that have to have the information. So when I go to a realtor, I will say, I don't want to live in a flood zone. I want a house that's concrete block on the first and second floor. I'll give them a list of what I want. And I
Yeah.
believe for realtors, the more educated your buyer is, the easier your job is. You're not going to be wasting your
Yeah.
time.
Well, some of those things you just mentioned, that's very easy to filter out. But you're not a first time home buyer either.
No,
You're like
I'm,
the second, third, fourth, fifth time.
but I've made mistakes. Each time
Yeah.
I make different mistakes. I'm pretty good at not making the same mistake twice, but I have made mistakes that I should have known about.
Yeah.
Obviously, I should have known about. And I always kick myself. I don't like to blame other people when I screw up because, like, I could blame my realtor for not telling us they were going to tear down the street, or I could have called.
Yeah.
Which is more a reliable way to go? I should have talked to the floodplain manager in this area and asked them questions because I didn't really know. I never lived in an area that could get wiped out like us. In the hurricanes Milton and Helene 2 years ago, the water was 4 feet from our front door.
Wow.
Every one-story house pretty much in our neighborhood flooded and is
Wow.
now being torn down or fixed. So I had no idea that was going to happen.
So one of the things I know we have some other questions, but one of the things I was curious to know is if you're living in an area where you've had some devastation, what is it like to live in an area where you had neighbors, you had a neighborhood, and just the urban environment of the disaster? And
It
how does that feel, and how does that sit with you as a property owner?
Well, first of all, I would probably move if I didn't have a daughter in high school who would kill me if we relocated her. So there's not really any place in our area we could move where there wouldn't be the same risk. I think that Floridians are pretty resilient people in that they're used to living with hurricanes, they're used to dealing with it. And I think you see two schools of thought after a disaster. The people that got hit by the disaster, their life could be changed forever.
Right.
And their behavior is going to either stay the same because they're going to blindly move back in after fixing it and think it's not going to happen again, or they're going to get out of here. And a lot of times you have to sell for 40 cents on the dollar because people now know that house has to be torn down. And then there's the people that, if I'm living next to a house that blows up and my house is fine, I'm probably thinking I'm invincible at that point. It's like, wow. A lot of people think, see, look, we're safe. They weren't. We're okay. They don't realize they were just lucky. And I'm more of the school of, okay, what do I need to do to be better prepared next time? Because we did get lucky. Water didn't come in our house, but it could have. So what do we need to do to be ready? But it's kind of depressing to walk around and see all the old houses getting torn down, or people still living in a trailer in their front yard, or the people that I think are really rolling the dice and just moving back in, thinking it's not going to happen again. Because we got damaged badly by a storm that didn't even hit us directly. It was the first storm, Helene,
Mm-hmm.
was way offshore. We just caught flooding from that, and it
Mm-hmm.
was unfortunate that it went that direction, but it did not hit us directly. The second one, Milton, was 20 miles away from wiping us out. It could have been the doomsday scenario for Tampa, where downtown would have been under 26 feet of water. All of South Tampa would have taken 10 to 15 feet of water. There would be 1 million homes that were damaged. They were saying a couple 100,000 people could potentially be killed. The
Yeah.
statistics are overwhelming in how bad it could have been. But I don't think most people don't worry like I do. I think most people are just going about their lives going, it's not going to happen. And I think
Yeah,
that's
with
really
your
dangerous.
background in weather, you really focus on the natural disasters rather
Yeah.
than man-induced disasters because there's a lot of those too. I mean, a lot of those fires in California, they were man-induced.
And you could say that with flooding here because a lot of people, when Hurricane Milton hit, there's a lot of people that most of the people that had flood damage did not live in a flood zone. And a
Mm-hmm.
lot of them, I think only 30% of the people here had flood insurance.
Mm-hmm.
So when it rains a lot or if there's construction and a storm drain gets blocked, your neighborhood can flood really quickly. And the people need to understand no matter where you live, if your house floods and you don't have flood insurance, your insurance is not paying you anything. And
Right.
insurance may look in a TV commercial like they're your buddy and they're there to help you and they're going to hang out with you. Flo's the best. She loves you. They're looking for ways not to pay you when there's a disaster. It's not, hey, George's house got damaged. Let's write him a check. No, it's, okay, George's house got damaged. Let's make sure everything's perfect. And then eventually we'll pay him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how it works.
Yeah.
So you're taking a huge risk. I think everybody, no matter where you live, should have flood insurance
Mm.
because you never know where that water is going to come from. You could live in a house that never gets water, and then there's a park a block away where they turn that into a condominium complex, and all of a sudden, where's all that water going when it rains?
Mm-hmm.
Might be headed towards your house. I mean, things can change quickly. There's a dam a mile away that cracks, and you never thought your house would flood. Why not have that? If it's not a flood zone, it's not going to be terribly expensive, and it could be the difference between recovery and failure for years.
Right. I mean, I think a lot of people too are talking about the fact that they want to self-insure because they're worried the insurance companies are not going to pay them. And
Yeah.
that's been a big topic of conversation, especially I've noticed with people that have second homes in Florida and they're in a condo and they want to self-insure. They think the condo company or the condo association's collecting enough and they have enough in reserves, and so they can drop that insurance. What do you think about that, George?
I think that's insane. I think that what we show in our film, there's a condominium complex called Punta Rasa that's down near Sanibel Island. And they were out of their place for over 2 years. They couldn't move back in. And they had assessments of over $100,000.
Hmm.
Most condos don't have reserves for the big disaster. They might have it if they go, okay, we need to paint the building. We need to update the air conditioning. Whatever the process is. But let's say you live on the eighth or ninth floor of a condo and the elevator is broken and they're not going to be able to fix it for a few months. You're not walking in and out of that place every day to go
Right.
anywhere. That's a lot of steps, especially if you're getting older and you're in age. So the reserves of a condo complex or something, and a lot of people live in those, deal with those associations, is huge. That's why it's a 50-page manual they give you of their bylaws, probably thicker than that. Have somebody read it or scan it and put it in Chat GPT and understand. Ask to see the reserves. What is the fund available? How
Right.
is that money used if there's a disaster? What kind of assessments can they give you? Because if you can't pay the assessment, they don't say, all right, well, get back to us when you raise the money, George. We'll be fine. You lose your condo. They'll
Right.
foreclose on you.
Right.
So
Right.
you could lose everything if you do that. And then for the people who self-insure, if you have hundreds of thousands of dollars in the bank and can afford to do that, you could certainly probably afford the home insurance. But I've heard nightmare stories for people in California that their insurance went up over $100,000.
Right. That's what I've heard
Crazy.
too.
Yeah, so I can't tell them, oh, you better pay that. I mean, I can understand you have a choice at that point. But when I was making The Last House Standing, there was one guy who had just taken the insurance off of his collectible coins and some old cars that he had. And then they had the Woolsey fire, and the car melted and the coins melted. Everything was destroyed, and he had no insurance on it. So there's a real risk in self-insuring. And I would caution you to really understand your situation, because you could end up with a house that burns down. And if it's an older house, to build a newer house is a lot more expensive. You know, there's people in Pacific Palisades that when I was living there growing up, they might have paid $50,000 for a house that now just the lot is $2 million.
Right.
You know, that's
Right.
not an easy rebuild.
No.
So that's a very difficult situation. So self-insuring is a very risky thing to do.
Yeah, and I noticed that, it's a lot easier to get the information and the standards when it's new houses. But when you're talking about well-developed and established neighborhoods, I think I read that you lived in Detroit at one point.
Yes.
Yeah, and so a lot of those houses, they were built in the 50s or even earlier. And so to find out what some of those standards were, that's a tough call. That's really hard.
That is. And so there's a real risk, and especially in areas like fire areas or in areas where there's hurricanes, because the code has changed to be
Right.
so much stronger. But a lot of the houses that were built back in the 50s, a lot of those houses were with brick.
Yeah.
Some of, whatever materials they were using, it's a lot better than some of the stuff they're using now. A lot of times here they put concrete block on the first floor, but wood on the second floor. Now, I'm not an engineer, but there's not an engineer that I've ever interviewed that thinks that's a smart thing to do. They think that you should have concrete on both floors because of things that could blow into your house, of degradation over the years as water gets in through the stucco and rots the wood so it's not as strong. So a house that's built in the 50s, the wiring might not be safe anymore. The pipes might not be safe. There's lead pipes. There's a danger from what you can get from that. So you buy a house like that, and then you rip open the walls. Anybody's ever flipped a house, sometimes the scariest thing you can do is tear open a wall.
Yeah.
Careful what you might find. And it's almost easier to build a new house than it is to, jigsaw your way through a house that you're trying to just make livable again, because you find so many surprises that might cost you a fortune.
Right, right. I mean, the average statistic that I've read over the last couple of years is that most first-time home buyers get a $10,000 surprise in addition to the home inspection items that have been flagged. But a lot of these home inspectors, they're not builders and they're not structural engineers. And so, some of these questions when we're talking about build to last really need a structural engineering analysis.
And that's going to intimidate a lot of people, because if I'm
Yeah.
buying a house and now I have to get $3,000 worth of inspections, what
Yeah.
happens if I find stuff and I end up not buying the house? Then I've wasted all that money. So I totally understand that
Yeah.
mentality. That's why you want to try to do as much research as you can on the front side about how houses were built there and have an understanding. Because,
Yeah.
that would really suck if you had to spend all that money and then you go, nope, we're going to pass. But let me tell you this. If you passed, that might be saving you $50,000, $100,000.
Oh, yeah. Point
Unfortunately,
well taken.
Unfortunately, most first-time home buyers just don't vision throwing $3,000 away on a house they might not end up with. And I get
Right.
that.
Yeah, no, they're looking at, what is it going to take to get to closing? So some of these things, when I read through, so who verified that the house would hold up if a disaster hits?
Yeah, that's important. Okay, so I'm at a house, I'm at an open house, and I ask the builders there, and I say, what did you do to make the house safe? And they go, well, we put in hurricane windows, we did this, we did this, we did this. I want to know, okay, well, who inspected that or verified it to put the good seal of approval on that, so I know that it was done correctly. They should have to get an inspection for that. If you're going to
Oh,
put in hurricane rated windows, I would hope some type of inspection shows that they were installed properly. But I would say so many corners are cut now in construction. And I watched a great video on YouTube a few weeks ago. A buddy of mine sent it to me. And I said, why are things so much more poorly built today than they were years ago? And that's because construction went from where workers were being paid by the hour to where they're now being paid by the job.
Hmm.
So if I'm on a job, the boss is saying, okay, let's get this job done and get to the next job. If I'm getting paid by the hour, I might say, but wait a second. There's some things here that still need to be fixed because I know it's not going to hurt me. I think when you're paying people by the job, a lot of stuff gets overlooked. A lot of
Right.
things get, you might not be able to give it the attention to detail that it needs. And you see that if you just go on Instagram and do home inspectors. And there's a few guys on there, a few women that are just fantastic. And they walk through houses on inspections, and you will not believe the things they find
Right.
of, a ceiling fan in a bathroom that just vented into the crawl space above. They didn't punch it through to the roof.
Well, and
Or
that was typical in when the house in the 50s when the house was built. That was code then, but it's
it's
not code anymore.
no, it's not. And then another thing I always tell people to do, and this is easy, it's not on my list yet. I probably should add it. I would want the builder to take out the engineering report that showed why he did the air conditioning the way he did it, the air conditioning and the heat, and
Uh-huh.
show me that the ducts are the right size, that the tonnage is right on the system, that the blower fan is the right size, and then the ducts up in the walls in the attic are done right, and that there's enough return air to have the system work efficiently.
Mhm.
Most houses, there's a very high inefficiency in the air conditioning because where can you save money? By getting a slightly smaller air conditioner. Instead of doing 13-inch ducts, maybe you could do 11-inch ducts.
Right.
And you want to know what they did, and they have a report that should show you what they did. And then ask questions about it. Have them show you where all the return airs are in the house. In the office that I'm sitting in, this one room in my house is 4 degrees warmer than the other rooms because the return air is garbage. It doesn't work properly. So I had to put a split system air conditioner in here. I have the best room in the house now. So whoever buys this house for me is, I would just tell them I did that. Yeah, and it's great. Look at this. This is
Mhm.
fantastic. But if you were using it just as a guest room,
Right.
your guests would hate you because if your house is at 76 and this room's 80 degrees,
Yeah.
you're going to be miserable.
Yeah.
So I want to know how they did that. And I've never asked that when I bought a house. When we ever move, I'm going to ask now because they didn't put the right tonnage in here. And I just had to get 2 new air conditioners for our house.
Yeah. Yeah. They just figure, well, that's, that phrase, and it really irks me is when they say, welcome to home ownership.
Yeah. But you know what? I agree. And there's an argument that says, well, you should have asked.
Yeah.
And so that's why I tell people, and I want to just beat this over everybody's head. Buying a house, you should become like a super sleuth detective or a reporter, and you
Right.
want to get as much information as possible. I know in a competitive market, sometimes you think the only chance they're going to accept your offer is if they like you. Well, my feeling is I don't really care if they like me,
Yeah.
and if they don't want to sell to me, maybe they're doing me a favor. If
Yeah.
I've asked too many questions, so they think, well, this guy's an asshole and he's going to be a problem. Yeah, I might be because I expect you to do your job. It's like if I make a film for somebody, if I cut corners and I go, oh, you wanted the good camera? Oh, you wanted my best editor? I just got a guy that's okay because you weren't paying enough.
Right.
I had some friends who were buying a house, were looking at a house, and I Googled the builder they're going to use or thinking of using, and he got terrible reviews. So when they went in to talk to him, they go, yeah, that's for the tract homes that we build, but the custom homes we have a better rating for. And I said, what a crock of baloney. So, okay, if you pay a little more, I'll build you a good house. But
Mhm.
if you're getting our standard house, it's not going to be as good because you didn't pay enough for it. Well, that's
Right.
the wrong attitude because the person paying for the lesser house, that might be all they have in the world. And they're
Right.
putting it all into that house for their family. Why should they get garbage? It's
Right.
not fair.
Well, and the real estate process too is very rushed. You go out and you look at a house and then you only have like so many days. And I think that's where a lot of home buyer remorse starts because people really don't know what they're getting themselves into. And it takes a long time. Um, well, I could go on and on about that, but I won't. But
Well, it's interesting. And the thing to think about, imagine you go to a bakery and all you ask about is the icing. You
yeah,
don't care about the body of the cake. That's what we do with houses. You see the granite countertops, or you see the hardwood floors, or the pool in the backyard, but you don't ask questions about what's behind the walls, or
right,
how is the plumbing done. Did they use regular subs or did they bid it out to whoever the lowest bidder was on the project? Who was the superintendent on the project? Was it a guy that's been with your company for a long time? And were they how many days a week were they out at the job site? Because I contest this, and I say I'll live and die by this. A job is only as good as the person watching the people that are building the house. If you send a crew in and just say, okay, you guys have a good day, I'm going to go over to the house down the street and work there, it's not going to be the same as somebody being there watching the people that are working.
Right.
And then how clean is the job site at the end of the day? Do they just leave everything lying around? Is it a pigsty? That tells you a lot about what's going to be inside the walls of your house based on what's on the floors of your house.
Yeah, I mean, I
So,
think a lot of the builders, they just go by the Uniform Building Code. And then if there's some other local regulations, like in Florida where there's flooding and that kind of thing, then they up it a little bit, but not by much because they're trying to keep that price point to a point where the house is going to sell. That's for the new houses, but for the older houses, the used houses, I think these questions are so hard to answer for most sellers. They just don't know what
and they
it
might
is.
be. So and most of the housing stock is older is not new construction.
Right.
So yeah, you could get these answered on new construction, but that's why you want to ask a lot of questions on existing houses, especially if you're in a fire zone. If you're out in California and how much brush is around the house? Where are places that the embers would go if the house did catch on fire?
Right.
What are the evacuation plans for the neighborhood? In the last house standing, we talked about Paradise, California, where there was only one way out of that community,
Right.
and they had to get out quickly. They had a problem in the Palisades because there's really just a couple ways out of there. And
Right.
people die when that's not taken into consideration.
Oh,
So you
yeah.
can't assume that just because somebody built a development somewhere or lives in a community that they thought about all that stuff. If you just walk around, this is a fun exercise. I do it every time my wife and I walk the dogs. I look at a house and I go, I'd love to have been at the meeting where they made that decision.
Yeah.
What was the thought process there? And one of the ones I notice all the time is those lights that people put below the soffits on the house
Uh-huh.
in areas where nobody will ever be able to change that light bulb ever.
Yeah.
But they put it there.
Hmm.
And it's like, what was the thought process there? Where did they go? Hey, let's stick that up there. We're done. We've put the roof on so nobody can get at that angle to ever change that bulb again. But it's not our problem because we're done.
Yeah.
Or a house where they didn't put a porch in the front and it's just the front door and a narrow little alley leading up to the front door. So it's not very welcoming and it doesn't. I just would love to be at some of these meetings and go, what were they thinking?
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's interesting because I grew up in a county and a lot of those fire requirements were placed on the homeowner to clear the brush. And I remember as a kid watching fires burn. And in one house we had, it had a wooden roof, if you can believe it. So when we moved, my dad really wanted to make sure we had a tile roof. But yeah, I think you bring up so many great points. So you've made two movies now, and so what is it that you really want to have happen? How would you like this to be disseminated and people really become aware and take some time and thought before making this large investment? And I look at buying a home. It's a investment for the long term. It's not just a house. But you really have to make sure this investment fits your budget, your needs, and how you can maintain it as well. That's part of the costs that need to go into buying the house, what a lot of people aren't thinking about.
Yeah, in a perfect world, building codes would be stronger. They would be
Mhm.
forward thinking, but it's very hard to change building codes because there's a huge lobby industry by builders
Of
to keep
course.
the code as low as possible.
Right.
It's not to their advantage to have a stronger code. So what I am encouraging, my whole message is a bottom up campaign. Let's stop rewarding garbage. Let's stop buying other people's hot potato house that they want to get rid of and it lands on you and the music stops. You don't want to be that person. So don't be desperate when you're making a decision. Don't go, we have to have that. You don't have to have anything.
Hmm.
Because what happens when you inherit a problem, it's your problem now.
Right.
There's people that have bought houses here in Florida that got damaged in the hurricane. They didn't have to disclose flooding at the time that house was sold. And then it floods 3 times for the person who bought it. And oh, by the way, the previous owner fixed things and they didn't get permits properly. So who are they going to tag with it now? The person who caught the hot potato. And now it's your problem. And now you've got to bring it up to code. So you need to know as much as possible and ask as much as possible so you don't become a victim. Because the stories of what happens to victims are just tragic. You know, you're all of a sudden you have no place for your family to live. You've lost everything.
Right.
And it's life altering. And I hate seeing that happen to people.
Yeah.
And so that's my goal, is to see it stop happening. So here's a great example of what people should learn about insurance. In the house we're living in now, we just switched homeowners insurance. And as the broker was pricing it out, he sent us back a thing and said, this one company's denied you. They won't insure you. And I said, why not? I live in a house that's built all of concrete. We really, it's been taken good care of. And he goes, you've made 2 claims. And I go, what are you talking about? We've made 2 claims, probably totaling about $5,000 for things that happened to the house that we thought were just normal claims. And he said, you would have been better off having the house destroyed and making a disaster claim than 2 small claims. Because now you're on the bad list of people who claim things when there's problems.
Yeah.
And that just was mind-boggling to me. So I've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars over the years in insurance. I've gotten back just a handful of chump change. And I'm the bad guy. I'm the one that is a risk because I claimed a water leak or I claimed something that broke that I had the right to claim because it was covered. So if you have small claims on your house, my advice to people is don't claim them. If it's a broken window, think about claiming them. You're going on somebody's list. Santa's not bringing you anything this year because you're on the bad list. Right. And it comes back to bite you. So you got to be careful.
Right, right. And one thing that I always recommended to first-time buyers was there are companies that do like a guarantee for a year. I can think of I think it was called American Home Shield, and they would insure the house for like a year if anything broke. So garbage disposals, dishwashers, things like that.
Yeah, but you got to be careful. The people they use to come out and do the work are doing it at a reduced cost.
Maybe.
So I've had American Home Shield before, and the other one, I've had them too. And so when you call because something's broken, the person that's coming out, in my experience, was not the best and the brightest in that field. It was the guy that was available and was willing to come out for 50 cents on the dollar to fix your problem.
Right.
So if it's pretty simple stuff, they're okay. If they're coming out to fix something that's really a problem, I worry about that. And it stopped me from getting that a couple of times because the people that they were sending out were not rocket scientists.
Well, you got to start someplace, right?
You do. And if you're buying a first-time house, getting a new dishwasher is not something you're budgeted for, and hopefully they'll come out and do it. But understand what they're going to replace and what they're not going to replace, and what the boundaries are. You really have to understand the contract with any of those places because any insurance, if there's a way they don't have to do it, they're not going to do it.
Right, right. Well, is there anything that we haven't really chatted about that you'd like to say to the YouTube world and for as part of the message?
Well, I would encourage everyone to go to my website, builttolastmovie.com, which you're going to put in the show notes.
Yes.
And it'll tell you what public television stations that might be in your area are airing the film this month. And I try to update that on a monthly basis. And then there's also a link where you can rent the film. So if you enjoy what I'm saying and you want to go, hey, let's throw a few bucks to the filmmaker and rent his film, you get the longer version of the film. And I think you'll find it very interesting. There are things you will take from this film that I think could change your life. 1, you never want to be a victim of a disaster.
Yeah.
2, you don't want to get a house and assume that it's well built just because it looks good from the outside.
Right.
And 3, don't assume that insurance is going to save you if everything goes wrong.
Right.
Because it's not a slam dunk. It's not an automatic. Flo's not coming out and going for coffee with you.
Right, right. Yeah. Flo.
Yeah, Flo and those commercials, even the State Farm. Wow, those are the greatest people. They hang out with you. You get to meet Caitlin Clark and all those fun people. That's not what's happening in a disaster. That's not
Yeah.
what's happening where your house burns down and now there's 500 people standing in line waiting to get them. I mean, just Google stories that have happened about insurance,
Mhm.
whistleblower insurance stories. I
Yeah.
know people that have had great experiences. They file their claim, it gets taken care of, and they
Mm.
get back to normal. But
Right.
there's the ones that go south are the ones you want to pay attention to because that's who you do not want to be.
Right, right. Yeah. No, and you bring up the insurance ads. I always wanted to be Mrs. Mayhem. They only have one guy who's a mayhem.
I
I
know.
wanted to
That would
be
be
Mrs.
fun.
Mayhem.
That's
You know? Equal
and look at that.
opportunity.
Yeah, but look at that commercial. And they make it seem like insurance is going to pay for something that Mr. Mayhem does, you
Yeah.
know, driving. But I guess if your car is parked on the street and he comes down and hits it, you want an insurance company that's going to take care of you. But we've learned that experience too. Even if you claim something on your auto insurance that's somebody else's fault, they're going to punish you for it. You're now on a list for
Mm-hmm.
3 years where you're considered a person who's likely to get in an accident.
Mm-hmm.
So even when insurance bails you out on something you had nothing to do with, my wife had somebody in a supermarket hit her car while she was shopping. 3 years we got tattooed for that
Wow.
because, and we were not at fault. We had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
So you want to be careful about that. And then one other thing you want to be careful about. This is a great one. When we switched insurances, they said, I said, do we have all the features? Is everything accounted for in the house? And the guy goes, yeah, you have concrete on the first floor and wood on the second floor. And I go, no, we have concrete on both floors. And they go, that's not how the county has it listed. And I go, you're kidding me. So I had to call the county. And I got a really nice woman for Hillsborough County on the phone who said, yeah, we have records. We send a drone or we drive by and we can see if you have wood on the second floor. So the first thing I'm thinking is, wow, I got a great lawsuit against my builder because they lied and it's not concrete on both floors. And then they dug a little deeper and they go, oops, you're right. You do have concrete on both floors. That saved us $1,000 a year on our insurance. So
Yeah.
if there are features in your house that make it safer, make sure the entity that can tattoo you with it knows that you have those. Make
Mm-hmm.
sure that they know that your house is fire coded to a higher rating because that will save you money on your policy. The insurance company is going to go to the county register, the website, and they're going to look and it lists all the things that that house has. And you want that stuff on there. So you've got to double check. I never would have known for probably 2 or 3 years, probably all the years we've lived here, we've been overpaying because they had written it down wrong.
Oh, wow. Yeah. And it sounds like you live in a lot of new houses, but for all the first time buyers out there, you can go to your town hall or your city, county, and you can pull the building file, and they should have the plans available. I routinely answered lots and lots of questions for first time home buyers when I was a planning director, and we had the building plan so they could actually see it. So there's a way to get that information as well. Um,
Yeah. And that's important. And you want to make sure everything was done to code, at least done to code or permitted properly. You know, if you're
mhm,
buying a house and it has a porch or a guest house or something,
mhm.
ask if that was permitted when they did it.
Yeah,
Because at
right.
some point somebody's going to ask, and you don't want it to be them asking you. You want it to have the seller have to pay for it.
Yeah, and it's funny. So I've lived in different states, and some states require that if you have built something or it's been done illegally, that they have to come back in and get a permit and go through the process. And in other states, if it's there for 5 years, they're all set. They don't have to go back and get a permit, which astounded me. Astounded me
Yeah.
because how do you know in 5 years they just figure if it's held up for 5 years, it's okay. And
Wow.
it's very shocking. So, yeah, there's always something we can learn and improve upon in this home process. But I found your film fascinating. I think it's great what you're doing. I thank you so much for reaching out, and I will definitely put all the links in as we've said. And it was great to meet you as well.
Well, thank you so much for having me on. Like I said, I love that you're educating first-time home buyers because they need as much information as they can. So they need a great resource like that that will help point them in the right direction.
Yeah, and what? One other thing is that a lot of these laws are very similar across our nation. They just differ a little. you know,
Yeah.
site
And it can apply,
specific.
it can apply anywhere, but you still don't want to assume that, okay, George is talking about hurricanes. I'm talking about the principles of knowledge that you can apply anywhere. A hurricane here is an earthquake in California. It's a tornado in Oklahoma. It's a
Right,
flash flood in Texas. A
right.
disaster is a disaster. If you talk to a victim of a disaster, no matter what got them, they're still affected by it.
Yeah,
And so you wouldn't be able to even guess their disaster just talking to them if they're talking about how they lost everything. So
right,
the same principles apply. Don't become a
right,
victim.
right. Yeah. Point well taken. Well, on that note, we'll sign off here. Thank you so much, George.
Awesome. Thank you.
All
Thanks for
right.
having me on.
All right. See you soon.